the number of attacks and disruptions against abortion clinics across the country have reached record numbers. The National Abortion Federation reported over 1,000 violent acts committed against abortion clinics, the highest number of attacks since the group started keeping records in 1977. Reporter Kate Smith joins me now to talk more about this. This is your latest piece. And, you know, you've been spending a lot of time reporting on the various sort of laws and changes happening across the country. I didn't even know anything about this story. So you got an opportunity to speak to the CEO of the National Abortion Federation. What did that person tell you?
So what's so interesting about this story, and I think kind of one of the most shocking things that I heard in speaking to so many providers and politicians and that CEO, is how normalized this violence has become. You know, every provider I spoke to, they tell me, well, this is just a part of our normal life, being stalked, being harassed, like having personal security at my home for my family and children. That's all normal. That is just par for the course for this profession at this moment. However, they're saying that on top of all of that, this year, it is even worse than they've ever seen in their profession.
Wow. And when we talk about acts of violence or disruption, what are we talking about?
We're talking about, so I really focused on violent crimes. So, taking out picketing, protesting, things like that. So it's really just things that are considered violent crimes, per the FBI. So stalking, harassment, vandalism, and then it gets worse. Death threats, arson, bombings, things like that. And, we saw a record high number last year. It was about 1,300 or so. And again, I spoke to these providers and they're saying that the rate at which these things are happening this year is much higher than last year. Now, they're pointing to a couple different reasons. And a big reason is because you're seeing abortion being spoken about on, different political stages, be it state or federal.
Right.
And spoken with this rhetoric that can be very harmful.
So that's what I wanted to ask you about, because we've heard, the president as well as others, say things about abortion, talk about late-term abortion, and talk about, children who could be live birth abortions, and phrases that have never really, aren't used in the actual sort of clinical world, that it's things that aren't done. What's a live birth abortion, right? So I'm wondering just how much this is adding fuel to the fire, they believe anyways.
That's exactly what it is, Marie. I mean, they're saying that is the number one reason why, you're seeing this increase. Because if you think about it, these are people who are very against the procedure. They've spent a lifetime fighting against the procedure. And if you hear the president call a doctor a baby killer, what they told me is that can be, a quote unquote dog whistle. That can inspire them to act. And of course, not all of these are threats. Not all of these are attempts. Like, some of these have been murders. There was a very well-known abortion doctor that was assassinated in 2009. And, he was being called a baby killer. He was being all these terrible names and very, careful rhetoric about him. And, a lot of people blame all of that, rhetoric that was being used to describe Dr. Tiller for his eventual assassination, because when someone hears that, it can really inspire them to act.
So I understand that this is a topic that people feel very passionate about, and we should clarify that there are people who are anti-abortion and they are not violent, and they may be even protesting, but they're protesting within the bounds of the law, as they should be able to. But what is the goal here when we're talking about sort of more violent protests? What do they want?
So that's a great point, and it's so important to note that the vast majority of people who are protesting access to abortion are of course not violent, and all of them are very careful to say that they do not condone this. This is not okay, even if they do believe abortion is murder.
Right.
Murdering someone is not okay, and intimidating and breaking the law is certainly not okay to get what they want out of this. And I was even speaking to some of the protesters outside of the Missouri clinic, the St. Louis clinic that we talk about so much. Now, they don't even call themselves protesters. So they view them as just standing outside of the clinic and handing out brochures. So there's a wide spectrum of what goes on here. But the biggest part, and what they all do have in common though, is they would like to see abortion become illegal because they believe that it was morally wrong. So even though they do it in so many different ways, the goal is the same at the end of the day, which is that women shouldn't be allowed to have this in their ability to terminate a pregnancy and have autonomy over her own body and determining when she does not want to be a mother.
Yeah, a goal is the same, but hey, when you become a criminal to meet your goal, that's completely different, right? It shouldn't be normalized that you need security. A lot of these people are not performing abortions at all. Planned Parenthood does all kinds of other stuff for women's health, and so you shouldn't have to be scared to go to work.
That's exactly right.
Kate, thank you very much.